Wolverine is pretty hard to kill, which means if you want to take him on, you have to be pretty powerful. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. I'm your host Amanda McKnight, and this is Top 10 Nerd. Today we'll be taking a look at some of Wolverine's most dangerous villains who have also coincidentally caused him some of the most pain in his life as we count down the top 10 most powerful Wolverine villains. Let's get counting. Number 10. Geist. Geist actually made his first appearance in Wolverine. He first shows up in Wolverine's 1989 series in issue 17. There he is working for the dictator Felix Caradid, who is the ruler of Tierra Verde. But we also learn of Geist's origins in this story, and his long history of villainy. Geist is Dr. Nikolaus Geist, a scientist who initially worked alongside Germany during World War II, even acting as the Führer's advisor for a time, giving him advice on what to do with his prisoners, how to treat them, and where to keep them. I think you know what I'm talking about here. Geist proved that he was truly one of the most vile villains of Wolverine's. Geist turned himself into a cyborg, though not a particularly strong one. He's kind of an old man cyborg. He was more concerned with longevity in his life than any kind of strength. And where his power truly shines is within his mind. Being brilliant, he managed to work his way into the company of powerful people, convincing them to let him act as their advisor or their chief scientist. Geist was also behind the unleashing of another seemingly unstoppable villain of the time, Spore. Spore was pretty crazy, to be honest. Number 9. Cyber. Weirdly, Geist is not the only cyborg enemy of Wolverine. In fact, he kind of has a few of those. I'm actually surprised none of them ever reached out and attempted to start a team all their own, like the Cyborg Wolverine enemy team dedicated to being cyborgs and taking down Wolverine. Sadly, it might be a little too late now, as quite a few of the cyborg-based enemies that I'm thinking of at least have been seemingly perma-killed. However, Cyber, despite being killed more than once, is actually not one of those. He is currently alive in the comics and was last spotted in 2018 in a Ben Reilly comic, surprisingly. Cyber initially was introduced as a Wolverine villain. His first form was fairly unstoppable and possessed powers similar to Wolverine, including retractable claws and a healing factor, because Wolverine villain. But it should be noted, every time he's come back he's been like a little bit different in terms of what his power set is. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more amazingly powerful Wolverine villains, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. And maybe comment below, and maybe share, why not? Number 8. Mystique. Mystique is an iconic villain for Wolverine, starting out as his enemy way back in the times of the Wild West, just as that period in history was actually ending, circa 1921. The two met for the first time way back then, and although Logan initially decided to trust Raven, she would inevitably end up stabbing him in the back. Something Wolverine would not forget over the years whenever he ran into her again. Mystique isn't a super powerful character in terms of who can hit the hardest, but she is powerful in the sense that she is a master deceiver and manipulator. She has tricked some of the most cunning and brilliant heroes in comics into doing exactly what she wants. She is also super mysterious. We don't actually really even know how old she is, and there are still lots of gaps when it comes to her backstory. Mystique is a shapeshifter who can transform into other humanoid beings, as well as more abstract things sometimes, depending on who's writing her. She can also disguise herself in any kind of garb she so chooses, as often the clothing we see her in is also created via her shapeshifting. Mystique can also alter her vocal cords to allow her to match anyone that she chooses to impersonate, and can even alter her form to match their retina and their fingerprints exactly. Hence why she's such a dangerous enemy to have. Master Infiltrator. Number 7. Lady Deathstrike. Lady Deathstrike is Yuriko Oyama, the daughter of Kenji Oyama, the man who invented the adamantium bonding process. So you can imagine how personal this feud is. Despite the fact that Kenji mistreated his daughter, Yuriko, after her father's death, would feel differently about him and actually ended up deciding to follow in his footsteps and continue his research. She also aimed to track down the one he blamed for stealing his life's work, Wolverine. Of course, Logan hadn't actually stolen the work, but he was the subject it had been used on to bond his bones with adamantium. Initially, she pursued him because she wanted his skeleton so that she could actually study it in an effort to continue her father's work and relearn the process that he had lost when his research was stolen. Lady Deathstrike would go on to become a dangerous and powerful criminal, upgrading her body and turning herself into a cyborg. She is known for her retractable fingernails, which are razor sharp and laced with adamantium, making them super strong and able to cut through most metals, and most materials in general. Number 6. Omega Red. I actually feel pretty bad putting Arcady lower on this list. I think he's a pretty powerful and badass villain all in all, but at the end of the day he can kind of be manipulated by others pretty easily, which is what makes him a little bit weaker to me in terms of where I wanted to rank him here. He only recently got his carbonadium synthesizer back after years of being separated from it. Generally, others wielding this important device have made him their puppet for as long as they possess it, hence why it's one of his weaknesses. The latest person to make Omega Red their loyal servant was Dracula, who was using Red to spy on Krakoa. Fortunately, Arcady managed to get the synthesizer back, which means we might actually get to see more of Omega Red's full potential in the future. Omega Red is pretty crazy powerful while in full control of himself. He can emit death spores, which are lethal and actually kill most people who come near them. He's also an energy vampire, draining others' life force in order to keep himself alive. This can also bolster Omega Red or be a weakness depending on the circumstance. And like many of Wolverine's most deadly villains, he's also a super skilled fighter with a healing factor. Pretty much everyone gets a healing factor. You kinda need it if you're going up against Wolverine and you want to stand a chance. Number 5. Daken. Akihiro is more of an ally of Wolverine's currently in the comics. On Krakoa, it seems everyone is given that second chance at family that they've always yearned for, Daken and Logan included. I really love the Wolverine fam actually, they're probably one of my favorite families over on Krakoa right now. But before Akihiro was on Wolverine's side and helping to defend and potentially protect him against other villains, like Omega Red actually, alongside the rest of the members of the family, he was actually attempting to kill his dad, if you can believe that, multiple times. Daken, being the almost naturally born son of Itsu and Logan, has powers very similar to his father. He possesses a healing factor and even bone claws, but his wrists. He also ages a lot more slowly, but he also has the added ability of manipulating others' pheromones, allowing him to control or influence them. He's also really good at fighting. Really good. Number 4. Sabertooth. Victor Creed might not be an insanely powerful villain in comparison to some of the others on this list, but when it comes to tormenting Wolverine, he's probably one of the best that there is. Not only does Victor possess a similar power set, but he also is generally the one who comes out on top whenever he ends up in a brawl with Wolverine, which is pretty often, especially considering Sabertooth has a habit of visiting Wolverine on his birthday. In fact, in his newly announced series, I'm really hoping Victor still gets that chance to keep up appearances, because he's a great antagonist for Wolverine, and I kinda love that weird tradition of the smackdown on Wolverine's birthday. Not only is Sabertooth bested Wolverine physically, but he's also got a sharp wit, and even once devised a plot to hurt Wolverine by pitting him against his son, forcing Logan to drown his son in a puddle in the end to stop him, which ends up somehow being even more heartbreaking than you think. Especially considering that son was Daken, and as I said, Daken has been kinda out to kill his dad in the past, so you wouldn't think that would make you sad, but it did. It was pretty sad. Number 3. Silver Samurai. Silver Samurai is a master swordsman and a mutant. He is so confident in his abilities to beat Wolverine in battle that in issue number 1 of the 2020 Cable series, when Logan asks when the two are going to fight one another for sport and entertainment on Krakoa, Silver Samurai responds with, "Is it your intention to give everyone on the island a marker?" in reference to the fact that Wolverine basically just lost to young Cable, and suggesting that Logan himself would also lose to Silver Samurai. Silver Samurai is Kenyochio Harada. Ken's mutant abilities allow him to generate a tachyon field, which he can focus through anything that he pleases. Typically he chooses to use this on his sword, which basically strengthens it, allowing him to cut through almost anything. And I mean almost anything. I don't think adamantium, but pretty much everything else. Number 2. Gorgon. Gorgon is an impressive fighter, as we saw in the previous X-Men series in 2019. In issue number 4, Gorgon is revealed to be a member of the security detail that Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse take with them while attending a diplomatic dinner with the other world leaders. Gorgon is asked to hand over his swords at the security clearance gate, as they are deemed too overt as far as permitted security weapons go. But Gorgon actually refuses and goes to respond with, "The problem is that you look at me and you think the blade is the weapon. And later, he proves that to be very true. The crazy thing about this issue is that Gorgon doesn't even resort to using his powers at all in the issue, and yet he takes out countless enemies just with his blades and skills alone. His mutant ability is that he turns any who make eye contact with him into stone, hence his name, Gorgon. However, in this issue, all he uses are his 2 blades and his insane fighting skills to defeat multiple enemies. I say defeat because remember, this is Krakoa, so no killing allowed. Maiming through dismemberment of limbs, however, that is permissible, as we see in that issue. Number 1. Ogun. Ogun was pretty powerful. He was a warrior who Wolverine met in China. He would end up becoming Wolverine's teacher and mentor for years. The two became close enough that Wolverine actually thought of Ogun as a father figure. However, one night when the two were attacked, it was revealed that Ogun had learned how to cheat death, effectively becoming immortal. After this incident, he became more obsessed with immortality, focusing solely on perfecting his technique. Perfection to him was being able to leave his own body and take over the body of others, allowing him to gain more power and in essence remain eternally young. He planned to use this technique on Logan actually, but Logan left before Ogun could attempt it. Later, Ogun would temporarily possess Kitty Pryde, but be defeated by Wolverine. He was even at one point sent to hell and still managed to return, so he's pretty unstoppable. Who do you think are some of Wolverine's most powerful enemies? Who are some of your favorites that weren't mentioned on this list? Honestly, Wolverine has so many great ones. Some of my favorites not included here being Roughhouse and even Magneto, another super powerful enemy who would end up becoming a pretty personal nemesis to Wolverine as time went on. Let us know your top picks in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Till next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.